In the previous part of this series, Princess Anor was arranged to marry Archduke Kashan, a foreigner, by her uncle, the Emperor. Kashan had taken an interest in Anor during the Emperor's party, where he helped her escape from her mother's clutches. Neither Anor nor Kashan were aware that they were betrothed to each other at the time. Anur's mother offers her a deal, knowing her daughter's reluctance to marry. She proposes that Anor marries Kashan for 3 months and dedicate herself to the marriage. If she doesn't like her husband after that time, she can get a divorce. Anor agrees to this arrangement. Upon reaching the Northern Empire for the wedding, Anor is shocked to discover that Kashan is the one she is supposed to marry. During the wedding, Kashan gives Anor another chance to back out, but she decides to go through with it, officially becoming his wife. The story continues with Anur, who is about to have her first night with her husband, Kashan. She is panicking because she fears she might inadvertently hurt him. Anur notices a window and considers it as a possible escape from the situation. She opens the window and contemplates the possibility of using it to flee. However, her plans are interrupted when she hears Kashan's voice asking her what she is doing there. Startled, she turns back and sees Kashan's fiery expression, feeling caught in the act. Kashan repeats his question, causing Anur to stutter as she contemplates whether to pretend to faint or be honest with him. Eventually, when he asks again, Anur decides to tell him that she just wanted some fresh air. However, Kashan questions her motive for wanting fresh air at that hour, and on the windowsill, Anur becomes nervous, fearing that her lie has been exposed. Kashan asks her in a serious tone if she is trying to die, catching Anur off guard. She stammers, trying to assure him that she wasn't, even though the thought of falling from the window had crossed her mind. She refrains from revealing the truth about wanting to avoid the first night with him, fearing his reaction. Kashan approaches Anur and extends his hand to help her down from the windowsill. Anur takes his hand, and he asks her to take care of her health. She becomes even more nervous, unable to find an excuse to avoid spending the first night with him. Anur worries that she might become the wife who accidentally harms her husband on their wedding night. When Anur remains silent, Kashan frowns, recalling how Anur's nanny once advised him to treat her delicately like glass because she was fragile. The story unfolds as Kashan takes Anur's hand and leads her away from the windowsill. While he recognizes that she is delicate like glass, he is unaware of her mental struggles and attempts at self-harm. On the other hand, Anur is nervous and contemplates pretending to faint to avoid spending the first night with a stranger. However, before she can execute her plan, Kashan picks her up in his arms and places her gently on the bed, covering her with a blanket. This unexpected kindness leaves Anur overwhelmed and unsure of what to do. Contrary to her expectations, Kashan tells her to get some rest, considering that she might be tired. He gives her a gentle peck on the cheek and advises her not to worry about anything. As Kashan leaves the room, Anur is relieved that her plan worked out, but she is perplexed by the way he treats her, feeling like she's being treated like a child. In the eyes of nobles, marriage is often seen as a tool to strengthen family ties and ensure prosperity. Many people assumed that the marriage of Archduke Teranujan and Anur would be a strategic alliance until they witnessed the couple at the wedding banquet. Their sweet and affectionate behavior surprised everyone, and the absence of the Archduchess from the banquet on the first day of their wedding deepened the misunderstandings. People began to believe that Kashan genuinely loved Anur, furthering the misconception. However, the reality of their marriage is far from what people believe. The next morning, Kashan observes Anur sleeping in a tree. His assistant, Alan, notices Kashan's expression and wonders if he is developing feelings for Anur. Curious about Anur's actions on their first night, Kashan asks Alan what it could mean when a new bride attempts suicide. Alan is taken aback by the question, but suggests that it could be an indication of the bride's intense dislike for the marriage, to the point where she wishes for death. Kashan sighs, believing that this might be the only possible explanation for Anur's behavior. However, Alan suddenly remembers something and presents an envelope to Kashan. He informs him that the second prince, Mackenzie, had asked him to deliver the invitation to Kashan. Kashan takes the letter and asks if Mackenzie had left immediately after delivering the envelope, to which Alan nods in agreement. He then asks Kashan when he will greet His Majesty, to which he replies that he will meet him soon in a sullen manner. After a while, Anor is seen having a tea and talking to her mother through a magic crystal ball. Playfully, her mother asks if she enjoyed her first night, as it must have been quite an event for everyone involved. Anur is caught off guard by her mother's words and ends up choking on her tea. She silently vows to get rid of the magic ball as soon as possible. As the conversation continues, Anur becomes alert when her mother informs her about a riot that has broken out. The Golden Dragon Knights have gone on strike to demand her return. Her mother tells her that the Emperor has requested her assistance in stopping the Knights' strike. This news surprises Anur. The Duchess goes on, mentioning that some of the knights have already broken contact, causing the Emperor to feel sad and disappointed. She also reminds Anur that she hasn't responded to the Emperor's call. Anur retorts that if the Emperor can't reach her, he can call Uncle Sarno instead. Her mother asks if she has met Duke Sarno yet, to which Anur lies, saying she hasn't because she is too busy. In reality, she is just avoiding meeting him because of her laziness. She remembers the knights are on strike and gets angry, imagining their reactions to her marriage. Suddenly, a maid calls Anur. The maid points behind her to several presents and informs Anur that they have been sent by Cashin. Her mother says through the magic ball that he must be very romantic and like Anur. However, Anur wonders if Cashin sent these presents because he misunderstood her suicide. Suddenly, she gets an odd feeling, as if someone is looking at her. She abruptly looks in that direction and finds a red-haired man waving at her. He comes out of the bushes, and Anur recognizes the man as Craven. Her eyes widen and her mouth opens wide in shock as she wonders how he is here instead of the Western Empire. Anur places a hand on her head and grimaces. She hadn't invited the knights to the wedding ceremony to hide her true identity, but Craven has arrived here. She wonders if he's real. Just then, Craven starts waving his hand again and smiles at her cheerfully, making her realize he's real. She decides to chase him away before people start to notice him. As her servants check out the presents from a distance, she whispers to Craven to leave immediately. Craven smiles and whispers back that he doesn't want to. His defiance angers Anur more. She stands up, deciding to chase him away herself. All of a sudden, she senses a powerful energy approaching from behind and becomes concerned. Turning around to identify the source, she stumbles as her heel gets tangled in her dress, causing her to lose balance. Anticipating a fall, she closes her eyes, but to her relief, someone catches her just in time. It turns out to be Cashin, who wears a reassuring smile while asking if she is okay. Anur's cheeks flush with embarrassment. She wonders if Cashin possesses great power, as she hasn't been able to sense him since the last time they met. This raises the question of whether he is also aware of her true identity as a sword master, considering that masters can recognize one another. Meanwhile, Cashin smiles at her, likening her to a cat whose fur is bristling. He helps Anura regain her footing and inquires about her activities. Cashin then signals the servants to depart, and they bow respectfully before leaving. Suspiciously studying Anura, he watches as she laughs nervously, claiming that she wasn't doing anything. Anura tries to divert his attention by questioning why he is there. However, he evades her query and asks whether she liked the gift he gave her. Anura is taken aback by the unexpected question. She later notices the gifts he had sent and recalls them. Cashin is hurt by her apparent lack of interest. Anya approaches the pile of gifts and forcefully expresses her affection, telling Cashin that she loves them. Hoping to dispel any suspicion, she tries to maintain a facade, but Cashin is already aware of her true feelings towards the presents. Suddenly, he notices movement in the bushes behind Anya, but his attention is diverted by a voice addressing him as his son-in-law. Turning to the table, he sees the magic crystal ball, which belongs to the Duchess Anor's mother. Anya realizes that her mother is also present. Cashin promptly shows respect by bowing to the Duchess and introduces himself. The Duchess compliments Cashin's handsome appearance, causing embarrassment to Anya. In return, Cashin pays compliments to the Duchess, comparing her beauty to Anya's. This flattery makes Anya blush intensely. The Duchess continues showering her son-in-law with praise, further fueling Anya's anger. Anya implores her mother to stop, but the Duchess persists in her admiration of Cashin. Frustrated with her mother's actions, Anya decides to abruptly turn off the magic ball, knowing that her mother won't stop her compliments. She plans to deal with the magic ball later. Anya apologizes to Cashin, but he reassures her that her mother appeared to be in good spirits. Anya raises her eyebrows, surprised at Kaisen's misinterpretation of her mother's demeanor. Swiftly changing the subject, she asks him why he is there when he should be working. Cashin once again ignores her question and inquires about her well-being. Anur becomes puzzled, but then realizes he is referring to the incident from the previous day. Kasan somberly asks if Naenir despises the idea of marrying him so much. Anur is at a loss, unable to find a way to resolve the misunderstanding. Kasan implores her to explain why she acted the way she did so he can assist her. Anur panics and hastily assures him that it was nothing important. She is unsure of what to say and contemplates revealing the truth, though she finds it too embarrassing. In an attempt to downplay the incident, she raises her hand and explains that it wasn't a significant matter, urging him not to mind it. Kasan pauses for a moment and reluctantly accepts her response. He tells Anura that she can talk to him freely about it if she wants to. Anur looks down and finally decides to confess the truth. As Kashan starts to leave, she reaches out and grabs his cuff to stop him. Kashan is touched by this gesture and looks at Anur curiously. Anur hesitates, but eventually reveals that she was scared during their first night together and had contemplated running away. Kashan is taken aback by her admission of wanting to run away. Anur closes her eyes, nervous about how he will react. Kashan repeats her words, acknowledging that their first night had been frightening for her, leading her to consider running away. Unexpectedly, he starts laughing and teasingly calls Anur cute. This compliment causes her to blush. He places a comforting hand on her shoulder and softly whispers that if she didn't want to be intimate with him on their first night, he wouldn't have forced her. His understanding response touches Anur, and she asks if he truly means it. Kashan smiles and puts a finger to his lips, implying that it's a secret between them. Remembering how Kashan had acted similarly before, encouraging her to make use of him, Anur finds his offers suspicious. Additionally, his demeanor makes him appear like a powerful individual. Anur decides to investigate him further, but for the time being, she puts those thoughts aside and flashes a smile at Kashan, since she achieved what she wanted. Kashan then returns to his office, leaving Anur to contemplate the situation further. He laughs as he thinks about Anor's confession from their first night. To him, she didn't seem the type to get scared like that. Alan stares at Kashan and wonders why he is suddenly laughing like that, questioning his sanity. He calls Kashan. Kashan turns to face Alan, and when asked about the matter, Alan lashes out in frustration. Eventually, Kashan calls Alan, who bows respectfully and asks if he needs anything. Kashan, currently occupied with writing a letter, informs Alan that there is a rat hiding in the palace and instructs him to find and exterminate it. Meanwhile, in the garden, a commotion ensues as the headmaid discovers that the crystal ball has been destroyed. All the other maids gather around as well. One of the maids remarks that an average person wouldn't have been capable of breaking such an enchanted magic ball. The headmaid furiously demands to know who is responsible for breaking the crystal ball. Meanwhile, Anur sits peacefully sipping her tea, knowing that she was the one who smashed the crystal ball when no one was looking. Suddenly, she hears a voice filled with tears, asking for forgiveness. It is one of the maids, tearfully confessing that she was in charge of the crystal ball and apologizing for not being more vigilant. However, the headmaid scolds her harshly for breaking such a valuable object, asserting that the maid wouldn't be able to afford to pay for the magic ball even if she worked in the palace for 10 years. Anur observes the headmaid scolding the maid with anger and addresses her as nanny. She inquires about the maid's fate, and the nanny informs her that the maid will be dismissed for breaking something valuable. Moreover, the maid will have to repay her debt, and due to the seriousness of her mistake, no other family will likely hire her. Hearing this, Anur begins to feel guilty. Anur steps forward and approaches the commotion, asking the maid what is happening. She understands that she needs to resolve the conflict since she was the one who caused it. The headmaid tries to reassure Anur, telling her not to worry as she can handle the situation. However, Anur insists that it is her concern since the incident occurred within her palace. Her words surprise both the headmaid and the nanny. The nanny is touched by Anur's sense of responsibility, realizing that Anur has already formed an attachment to the palace. She decides to inform the Duchess about this. Anur gazes at the broken pieces of the sphere and advises the headmaid not to make such a fuss over something trivial. Anur wonders if her words will be enough to prevent the maid from being kicked out. As the accused maid, along with the other maids and the nanny, looks at Anur in shock, they realize that their new archduchess is quite merciful. Their prolonged gazes make Anur uneasy, prompting her to turn away. The headmaid asks Anur if it's really okay to ignore the matter, to which Anur smiles and reassures her that it's natural for people to make mistakes, and they can simply buy a new magic ball. She orders the maids to return to their duties, considering the matter resolved, However, the accused maid approaches Anur once again, tearfully pleading for her acceptance of allegiance. This plead catches everyone's attention, and they all stare at her. Anur is surprised by the maid's actions and asks her what she's doing. The maid declares Anur as her savior and vows to repay her kindness until her last breath. This makes Anur feel even more guilty, knowing that she was the one who broke the magic ball in the first place. She tries to calm the maid down, but her attempts are unsuccessful. Suddenly, the nanny calls for the maid's attention and presents a box containing another crystal ball. Inside the ball, the Duchess can be seen laughing. The Duchess reveals that she anticipated something like this could happen, so she had sent plenty of her magic balls. Anur rolls her eyes at this revelation, realizing that all her efforts to cover up the incident were in vain. Nevertheless, the maid is now calmed. After the incident, the headmaid reports what happened to Alan in Cashin's study. Alan is shocked to hear the details, while Cashin smiles proudly. He hadn't expected Anur to take such an interest in palace matters. As he prepares to leave, both the headmaid and Alan notice him and inquire about his destination. Cashin smiles and informs her that he is going to see his wife. He slams the door behind him, leaving both of them stunned. Cashin wasn't the type to leave while working, and Alan wonders why he has gotten weird. Meanwhile, the accused maid is trying to find Anur to plead her allegiance, while Anur is avoiding her. Anur sighs, frustrated with always ending up in such situations. Suddenly, she is startled by a voice calling her name, and she turns to see Craven. Anur is shocked to find Craven dressed in a woman's disguise and asks him why. Craven proudly reveals that it's his disguise, leaving Anur speechless. When asked if he is dressed as a maid, Craven nods affirmatively. Anur places her hand on her head, annoyed with his antics, and contemplates the idea of killing him. She questions if anyone has seen him like this, to which Craven confidently assures her that nobody noticed, as infiltration and disguise are his specialties. Anur then inquires about the whereabouts of the knights. Craven explains that he has written his resignation letter and came to see her. His words surprise Anur, and she asks why he did that. Craven firmly responds that he should be with his commander, Anur, as it is his noble duty to pledge allegiance to the emperor. Anur rolls her eyes at his statement and decides to ignore him. She begins to walk away, but Craven chases after her. He makes it clear that despite his pledge to the emperor, the only person he truly wishes to follow is Anur, his commander. Anur continues to ignore Craven's pleas, trying to tune out his curses and frustration. She wishes for him to quiet down and stop bothering her. However, Craven persists, reminding her of the battle where she once saved his life. He questions the nature of their marriage, expressing his dissatisfaction with her pretending to be frail. He demands that she give him back the strong and cool commander she once was. Anur remains indifferent to his outbursts, which only further infuriates Craven. In a fit of anger, he grabs her to face him, reminding her of her victories with the swords Evermore and Nevermore, and questioning why she is treating her beloved swords so poorly. The forceful confrontation catches Anur off guard, and she frowns at him, ordering him to leave and stop being nosy. She suggests that he should go with Uncle Sarno, who is returning home soon. Craven, however, starts crying and pleads with Anur to let him stay, even if it's just as a maid. At that moment, Craven notices Cashin observing them with a dangerous smile. Cashin questions Anur about what is happening between her and Craven. Anur is taken aback by Cashin's presence and stutters in response, not sure how to explain the situation. Anur is startled by Cashin's sudden appearance and tries to figure out how to introduce Craven to him. Cashin looks at Craven and remarks that it's his first time seeing this maid. Anur quickly agrees with Cashin's statement, but then realizes the implications of what he said. Cashin continues, noting that the maid doesn't appear to be from the ducal palace, and Anur quickly comes up with an explanation, saying that she brought the maid from the Western Empire. To her surprise, Cashin acknowledges Craven as a maid, and Anur is relieved that he doesn't see through the disguise. Cashin smiles and accepts her excuse without further questioning. Craven bows and takes his leave, while Anur's handmaiden glares at him as he departs. As Craven leaves, he feels a mix of relief and concern, noticing Cashin glaring at him angrily. He wonders if he's imagining things, as Cashin had been smiling at him before. Nevertheless, he continues on his way, hoping that Cashin hasn't seen through his disguise. Meanwhile, Anur observes Cashin's expression, noticing that he doesn't seem pleased. she musters the courage to ask him if he's upset. Cashin responds by questioning her about the secret conversation she had with the maid Craven. Anur waves her hands, assuring Cashin that there was no secret conversation with the maid. Cashin smiles and expresses his trust in her, relieving Anur. She then asks Cashin if the maid Craven appeared muscular and manly to him. Cashin cautions her, saying it's rude to make assumptions about someone's gender based solely on their outer appearance. Anur agrees and wonders if Craven's disguise was successful. Cashin gazes at her and compliments her eyes, noting their beauty when she's in deep thought. Anur remarks how others have considered her eyes scary, like those of a killer. Cashin insists he is not lying. Anur indeed has the ominous crimson eyes of a killer. She was Ruel Ghost's executor and has been seen as a cursed monster because of her bloodshot crimson eyes. Anur reveals that people have always been scared to look her in the eye ever since she was a child. Being born with such eyes, she was considered the family's curse, as usually only one person in each generation possesses such eyes. She further tells Cashin that her grandfather and uncle were both sword masters with crimson eyes. Cashin inquires if her uncle was the one who captured the apocalyptic dragon that awakened 30 years ago, ending the 10-year war with the Eastern Union. Anur hesitates, but agrees with Cashin, acknowledging that her uncle is indeed a dragon slayer. However, she expresses confusion about the claims that he single-handedly ended the war with the Eastern Union. Anur describes her uncle as a good person, which brings a smile to Cashin's face. She wonders about the reason behind his smile and addresses him as Your Highness. This causes Cashin to frown, leaving Anur uncertain if she said something wrong. Cashin then requests that Anur call him dear. Anur is taken aback, as she has never used that word before, and asks why he suddenly wants her to address him like that. Cashin calls her by her name, stirring her emotions. He informs Anur that he will be calling his wife by her name now, and asks her to do the same with him. Anur flushes, pondering for a moment, and eventually calls Cashin by his name. He draws her closer and caresses her head, praising her for complying with his request. After some time, Cashin goes back inside and thinks about the maid Craven, who was with Anur. Based on Anur's reaction, Craven didn't seem dangerous to him. He smiles cunningly and contemplates the idea of catching him later to interrogate him. 2 days have passed since Craven appeared in the palace, and it surprises Anur that no one has commented on his disguise as a woman. She finds it strange, and wonders if her ominous crimson eyes are the reason for this lack of attention. Craven approaches Anur and inquires if the commander has called for him. Anur asks Craven to explain how he managed to come to the palace. Craven stands respectfully, stiffening his body, and explains that after Anur left to get married, the Golden Dragon Knights caused an uproar. Since all the knights act as one unified body, they all went to find Anur, but she wasn't there. Craven adds that he couldn't imagine the knight staying still after her sudden disappearance. In response to the situation, he proudly informs Anur that he immediately handed in his resignation letter. Anur looks at him, finding Craven's behavior odd, and contemplates whether she should tell him the truth about the marriage being only for 3 months. Craven continues, saying that he also encountered Ergen on his way to submit his resignation letter, and wonders if Ergen also resigned happily. Anur clenches her teeth in frustration, asking Craven not to say such things cheerfully. As Craven ponders over her words, he notices the accused maid glaring at him from the half-open door. Realizing she's been caught eavesdropping, the maid shrieks, causing both Anur and Craven to look at her in surprise. Anur wonders how long the maid has been standing there. Craven gives the maid a cold glare and tells Anur that he will handle the situation as she is annoying the commander. He starts to walk away, and Anur's handmaiden yells in shock, asking him what he's about to do. Craven approaches the maid and fully opens the door, giving her a stern look. He informs the maid that Anur's handmaiden has already accepted his allegiance and urges the maid to pledge her allegiance in the next life. The maid is scared and screams in fear before running away, calling Anur mean. Craven closes the door and starts to laugh, which irritates Anur further. She considers the idea of having Craven leave with Uncle Sarno. Later on, Anur sits outside for tea, and Craven is still present, serving her. Anur is annoyed by his presence and asks him to leave as she wants to be alone. Craven smiles and reminds her that she will need a maid soon, since she's heading to the capital. He explains that every married noble must follow one rule unconditionally, obtaining the approval of the emperor. The tradition of the emperor presiding over possible conflicts within the family and announcing property inheritance for the nobilities is considered a formality in today's day and age, as perceived by Anier's handmaiden. Suddenly, a group of angry maids, including the head maid and the accused maid, approach Anier. Anier wonders if they have found out that Craven is actually a man, which she finds strange if they haven't discovered the truth yet. The headmaid bitterly glares at Craven, who returns the same look. Anier stands up and tries to clarify the situation, but the accused maid interrupts and accuses Anier of being unfair. She reveals that they were with Anier first and feels hurt to see her getting close to Craven. The maid asks if Anier favors Craven just because he is from the Western Empire. They claim they promised to train in the West as well, hoping Anier would give them a chance too. Both Anier and Craven are dumbfounded by the maid's accusations. The headmaid joins in and agrees with the other maids, expressing that it would be unfair for Anier to favor only one maid. Anier realizes that their jealousy is solely based on her seemingly close relationship with Craven. She forces a smile and assures them that it wasn't favoritism, confessing that she values and likes all of them. Her words touch all the maids, including the headmaid, and the tension begins to ease. They understand that Anier cares for each of them and didn't mean to hurt their feelings. The misunderstanding is resolved, and the maids are reassured of their place in Anier's heart. The maids also confess their fondness for Anier, and she smiles, pleased that her words have had a positive effect on them. A few days later, Anier is ready to depart for the capital. Kaisen advises her not to be nervous, reassuring her that she only needs to give her greetings. He takes her hand and kisses it, causing Anier to blush. Cashin informs Anier that he won't be able to see her for a while, as he needs to complete his work in the palace first. However, he promises to catch up with her soon. Anier tells him that she will leave with Uncle Sarno first. Cashin lovingly caresses her face and gives her a peck on the lips, telling her to be content with this gesture if she misses him. As the carriage sets off for the journey, the excited maids nearby gasp and praise the couple for making Anier's cheeks flush even more. Craven, riding on horseback, notices Duke Sarno and smiles, relieved to have some company during the ride. Inside the carriage, Anier sits with her nanny, who praises Craven for being sincere. Anier explains that it was that same spirit that made him the vice commander of the knights. Anier suddenly realizes that this is her first time traveling in a carriage, as she has always ridden a horse. She finds the experience pleasant, enjoying the opportunity to see the surroundings from a different perspective. She suddenly blushes and touches her lips, remembering her kiss with Cashin before they departed. Anura still has 3 whole months to endure her married life. During this time, she will be faced with the decision to either stay fixated on her initial plan to divorce or potentially change her mind as she spends more time with Cashin. Meanwhile, Cashin, who has feelings for Anier, will continue his efforts to win her heart. Whether or not he succeeds in capturing her affection remains to be seen. As for Cashin's identity, there might be more to him than being the Archduke.